Hey, I think we are live, Abhijit.
How you
So
doing, Srini?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Abhijit? It's been some
Oh,
time since we
it has
connected,
been. That's right.
and
Good to see you.
it's actually very interesting to see you here.
My pleasure.
So just give me 1 second. Yeah, Abhijit, hi.
Hey, Srini. Pleasure to be
So
here.
same here. So guys, thanks a lot for tuning in. I know we are late by a couple of minutes. My profuse apologies for that. Just give me. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Abhijit. Guys, I know we are late by a few minutes. We're just trying to, smoothen out some technical glitches, but thankfully, all of it is, out of a way. Welcome, Abhijit, again, to this wonderful series. And, today I'm doubly excited. Typically, there is a very high level of excitement that I have whenever I host people who've been there, done that, and whenever I get to learn, my team gets to learn, and more importantly, all the followers of a YouTube channel get to learn about how to build products. But today, there is an additional level of excitement because this session is super special for me. And the reason is for the first time in the history of, Road to SaaS, or for that matter, any event that I've done online, right? I get to talk to someone I actually worked with directly at some point in
That's
time in
right.
my career. And of course, a lot of water, as they say, has flown under the bridge since then. Careers have diverged, but it is really, really heartening and to a great extent nostalgic to see someone I worked with, someone I looked up to since the early days of my career here. So it's also, kind of a special fanboy moment for me. So thanks a lot, Abhijit, for doing
Nice,
this.
nice for you to say.
And
It's interesting. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about it, but um, it's nice to reconnect. But I think to me, it's one of the things that excites me the most is how the ecosystem here in India and in Bangalore, where we worked together 15 years ago, probably,
yeah,
has evolved. And
yes,
what's nice, and I think it's actually a very important point. The reason ecosystems and cities and things like the Bay Area and Bangalore happen is because these aren't by chance. I think things build upon each other. That you and I worked together 15 years ago at Intuit,
yes,
many moons ago. So it's like literally off the thread on my LinkedIn profile. But that group,
yes,
um, I think we had the MD of Twitter, we had the MD of Daily Chat, we had Daily Hunt. Sorry, we
yeah,
had the
yes,
global head of Google Geo.
yeah,
We had
yes,
so many share chats head of engineering, like just multiple time entrepreneurs. So I think that there's a reason for that. I think this is not a coincidence. This is the ecosystem evolving, and you get people together and they build upon each other and they learn from each other and they can reconnect. And that's the fabric of how you build phenomenal tech ecosystems or an ecosystem. So
oh,
no,
absolutely,
it's awesome to reconnect and reminisce and
yeah, yeah,
see where
absolutely.
we've come.
I mean, that was a one hell of a kick-ass group. Got to make some friends for life. Many of them have turned out to be entrepreneurs. Some of them actually, ended up also funding those entrepreneurs that came
That's
out of that
right.
ecosystem. I
That's right.
always say that I am where I am today because of that ecosystem. My first check was written by one of the guys from that
Yeah.
ecosystem. So, fond memories.
Yeah. Yeah. And very kind of very relevant for kind of the conversation we're having today and why this is such an exciting time to be in India.
Absolutely. And for the unversed guys, my name is Srinivasan Narayan. I am the co-founder and CEO of the Good Meetings platform. Uh, Apart from my background and my t-shirt, we will not talk much about Good Meetings, so don't worry. This is about learning from Bobby, Abhijit Bose on how to build products from India for the world. But just I'll spend a few seconds about Good Meetings. Good Meetings is a online video platform that helps sales guys sell 10x better on video, right? We basically help sales guys uh, review their calls, understand what happened during the calls. They get quick summaries. They are able to better understand, how a particular sales call went, how close the sales call came to an ideal sales call, and therefore they are able to kind of get a better grip on their sales processes. So that's what Good Meetings is all about. You can check out our website goodmeetings.ai, right, for more details. The reason we are doing this is because this is basically one of the many episodes that we have done on a topic which we call the road to SaaS. When I started out the second time as a SaaS entrepreneur, I realized that there was so much that basically was hiding in pockets, in nooks and corners, so much great knowledge, right? And I was trying to fish them out, and I realized that a lot of entrepreneurs in my network were also, super interested in that kind of information, especially around building a product from India and scaling it globally, right? So that's how this whole discussion series started. And the idea is to get one person who's been there, done that, probe him or her further, understand more around the nuances of not just product building, but more importantly, product selling, product GTM, how to position your product, especially in the global markets. And today we have with us Abhijit Bose, popularly known as Bobby Bose. Thanks a lot, Bobby. And I'll just take. I know you need no introduction, but I will have to do that for the sake of completion. So Bobby has been long on India since I think I was a student, right? Since 2005, and I have some gray hair, so you can understand how long he has been long on India, right? Uh, Bobby has, came back to India in 2005 after having spent a good amount of time in the US. Bobby is, was probably, one of the was he had built products like NGPay. When I graduated back in 2007 from engineering, it was one of the apps that I used to look up to as an app that was built from India by techies from India for the world, for India and for the world. Then Bobby and I worked briefly together at Intuit. After that, Bobby basically, built one of the first B2B SaaS products to come out of India ever, which is EasyTap. And that was also, kind of having its market in India, which is unique even today, because most B2B SaaS entrepreneurs feel that, they should be building from India for the world. Bobby has always been a contrarian, and he has proven it multiple times in his journey, EasyTap being one of them. And then, of course, we all know Bobby was heading WhatsApp India for some time. So that's been, a brief introduction about Bobby. Thanks again, Bobby, for coming in. I'll now, get into the directly into the business end of things, Bobby. First things first, I still can't fathom 2005. India is, I think the only thing known about India was tech services, right? We only had the Infosys
Yeah.
and the cognizance of the world, right? Back then, someone like you comes back. I'm sure you had a very comfortable job,
Mhm.
in the US. You come back to India to build a product, right? And India was not a product nation by then. I mean, it took a
Yeah.
long time for India to basically mature as a product nation. I think we are still in that journey, right? Uh, so I'm just trying to go back in time, Bobby. What made you come back to India in 2005? How could you think long about India back then? I still remember 2007, I graduated, Bobby.
Right.
Most of my batchmates were actually busy giving their master GMAT or the GRE to go abroad, right? And here I
Yeah.
see someone coming back in 2005. I just want to know, I'm so intrigued by that. So let's start
Yeah.
with that journey of yours.
It's amazing to kind of, thanks for that intro. That's very nice. It's amazing it's been 20 years. I mean, it has been 20 years. And actually, it's interesting. I'll correct something. I didn't come back. I was born and raised in the U.S. As was my wife has spent some time in high school here. So
I see.
we were the classic Indian origin kids who were born there and had every reason to stay there. We were in the Valley from 2000 to 2005. And yeah, things were Silicon Valley. And of course, lots to do. But, it was, I'll tell you the story in a second, but I think the kind of the headline is the following. To me, just India was this massive opportunity waiting to be untapped. And for us, it was like, yeah, we could keep doing this Valley cycle, and it's a very phenomenal place to be, and lots of amazing things happen. And every 5 years, something amazing happens out of the Valley. So that's not a bad place to be, but to come in on the ground floor, and if you the way we looked at it was, if you had a 25-year perspective, that's the way you should think about things, right? So the actual time to go to the Valley was probably not 2000 when my wife and I both moved to the Valley from the East Coast. The time to really be in the Valley and really get the benefit of this network effect, which we talked about at the beginning. Just what happens is it happens over 15 years, these networks and these evolutions and how you build roots in places. And these aren't just transactional jobs. The time to come to the Valley was probably 1995 or really 1980s if you're really one of the old timers. And so you really get to see the cycle. And those are the people we looked up to when we were moving out there. So, Tom Friedman wrote The World is Flat. I was in the Valley and I was like, hey, listen, I should do something entrepreneurial. And I could have joined all these different startups that were there. But 2004, 5 was a very weird lull. It was a lot of enterprise SaaS, not SaaS, enterprise kind of on-prem companies out there. But the idea of, building the next Amazon or the next Google or the next something, that was what was in front of you in India. So we thought we would come out here. And yeah, I think it's taken much longer than we thought. We thought we'd be here for 5 years. I've told the story many times. It's been 20 years. So we've really seen the cycle from the early days of Bangalore when NGPay was, I think, one of the first 5 or 10 startups that had ever been funded by kind of institutional capital. That was funded by Helion. It was the first investment by Helion in those days. And companies like, I don't even think Excel or Sequoia were even in India those days. And we used to get together, all of these startups would get together, and we would take up half of every funded startup, and we all knew each other, would meet in the Leela, and we would barely take up half of a ballroom. And of course, now, you could barely, fit 1% of the startups there. So that's what it was like there. And it was really just this idea of like, go long. And the advice I give to people and entrepreneurs is, or anybody, quite frankly, is the thing to do is not be a marksman. You can't be a sniper. You should think of it more like, instead of being a marksman and saying, hey, listen, what's the perfect company? And every single thing I'm going to do is going to be exactly right. I would think about careers as an entrepreneurial journey and careers as jumping in a river. And that river is going to be turbulent and it's going to go here and there. And sometimes you're going to go under the water. But as long as you kind of pick the right river to go in, you can kind of navigate your way in. So you should really think in terms of 10, 15, 20 years. And that's kind of why we were here. And the idea was like, hey, if you're going to take a bet where you could come in with huge beta, huge upside, come in super early and really be part of the foundational group of people that make stuff happen. And, why would you not bet in India for the 25 to 50-year time frame? And I think it's now what we thought we were getting into back then is happening right now.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Go long and go early. I think that's the that's the mantra. And and don't measure much. It's about taking the plunge. As long as you know the direction, you will learn how to swim.
Yeah, and by the way, it doesn't have to be early. Just get in and go for the long term. So once you're in, just kind of pick the river you want to get in. If you want to be in India tech, it's a phenomenal place to be. And I would think about 15-year time horizons, because that's how it takes these things to bake and evolve, and how you build networks, and you understand the market, and you build ideas, and that's how these things bake, and it takes time. So that's the lesson.
Got it. Now, moving along, right? 2005, you come to India, right? You work for NGP, right? I have used NGP, I remember. This is before the app world actually, came along.
That puts you in a very unique category. That was a couple generations of tech ago.
Yes. So I'm disclosing my age to people here, but yeah, it was what it was. But then, after NGP, if I'm not mistaken, you joined into it, right? You build that product, GoConnect. Your thought process on, selling into the Indian market to SMBs back in 2010, 11, 12, right? And just for the unversed, Intuit had actually, kind of build this product where they were kind of building a CRM for SMBs in the SMB for the SMB market in India. It was like a CRM that would help SMBs understand their customers better, keep in touch with their customers better, and therefore help them get better revenues, better retention. I remember working briefly in that product. That's where I met Bobby. But Bobby, your learnings from that phase in 2000, 9, 10, 11, 12 India, where you were building a product. I think it was a SaaS product, if I'm not mistaken. SaaS as a term was
one of the very first SaaS products
out of India. SaaS wasn't a term that was, obviously as prevalent as it is today, but this was a SaaS product. Your thoughts of, building that product, selling into SMBs in India, your learnings, what worked, what didn't, and how that basically evolved you as a, as a sharper business person.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I got my MBA in 2000, and so went to the Valley, and my first job in the Valley was as a product manager for a CRM company. And this was a company called Siebel, which was classic on-premise software. So just CRM as a category has kind of gone through the evolution. And the very first, probably the bellwether of SaaS was Salesforce.com. And I remember being at Siebel when Salesforce showed up, and we were like, what is this? This is not how software works. This is not what the model is. The model is you sell licenses, you basically ship the CD, or you kind of give people access to the software at the end of the quarter, and you kind of charge 10% AMC, and that's the model. It was interesting to be part of a company that saw Salesforce come up and say, no, we can kind of question all of these premises. And so I was on the product side then came out here and did a year of sales. So it was also humbling to sell your own product as well. So I came out here as a product, and when I was thinking about moving to India, people very nice said, look, why don't you come out and can help build a business for the product that you ran. I think there's a couple lessons. So if I kind of think about that period, as you're pointing out, we were super early in a lot of the evolution of SaaS now. For me, I'll even talk on NGP. I'll kind of bucket the two. And timing is very important. So understanding where the market is. You can have the right product, but you can be super early to a market, super early in terms of kind of the cost structure of when these things deliver enough value for this to be kind of a hockey stick type of adoption. Super early in terms of where markets are in terms of not just needing it, but actually having a willingness to pay. And then super early in terms of scalable distribution. So if you think about just building a business, and GPay was Paytm before Paytm. We were basically on the mobile. It was phenomenal. When the first time I saw the demo, I was like blown away. It was on a Nokia 2000 series phone, which is like an early stage 2000 rupee Indian phone. And just the amount of technology that goes on to make e-commerce available on a feature phone, which people don't do anymore. So it was amazing technology, but what we realized was that just the amount of effort and time, and just even kind of where the consumers were in terms of adoption, digital payments, and basically competing transactions, there was just a lot of friction there. So it was a phenomenal technology, clearly the right idea, because Paytm came around a couple of years later and did phenomenally well. So that was a lesson. And it really kind of made me think, and same thing with GoConnect, which was, we were in that transition between feature phones and smartphones.
Smartphones.
And if you remember back in those days, there was a lot of stuff that we were doing about how do we basically bring software and make it available to the mass market on Nokia phones. Nokia at that time, and again, dating us, was by far and away the #1 provider. So we were in this weird thing of, do you go with where the market is, or do you go where the market is going? Of course, if we built software on smartphones, it would have been much easier for it to do stuff. And we were spending a lot of time solving kind of a feature phone kind of limitations, if you will. So right product, helping SMB sell better, is a huge market. It will only get better as kind of more small businesses and more consumers get online and kind of connect to each other over phones, over the digital internet. As payments become more frictionless, I think you'll see, and as more unorganized become organized and kind of move on to platforms, you're going to see small businesses of all sizes need that product. So the timing, though, there was just a ton of friction. And so one of the key lessons was really understand two things: kind of what's the structure, everything from value proposition, what's the kind of market need, and even if the market need is there, kind of what's willingness to pay or ability to pay. Is there enough of actual behavior where the flywheel is going to move? And then think about distribution as well. One of the things that we used to think about was, how in the world do you sell enterprise software and SaaS to a small business? And so that's as much part of the problem. So that's kind of the thought exercise that I think needs to go, that entrepreneurs in particular should go through when they really think about what's the right timing. Is this the market touch point ready? Now, you don't want to be late. Better to be a little bit early and be kind of a first mover, learn a lot of lessons, and then kind of accelerate as the market kind of is there. But I don't think you want to be too early. So that's number one. And these markets evolve. One of the other things I learned, and I've taken it and kind of instilled it in everything that I've done since, is what Intro was phenomenally good at, and you'll remember this to this day, was never build a product in the office. So I have two mantras. You have to be out selling your product, and you have to be out basically getting feedback from the wild. Some people, phenomenally great products are built without that. If you really are thoughtful about what you know what you want to build. But just, we did a lot of A/B testing. It was like, it was A/B and then A/B of A/B and A/B for everything. And so that was one of the big takeaways. I just want to see customers use it. So and we'll talk about EasyTap in a sec, but we sold EasyTap before really building every feature. It was like, hey, listen, let me just understand the value proposition from the horse's mouth. Obviously get to a point, go out and sell it. If people are willing to buy it and put money in, that's kind of a proof of that there's a pain point that you've really actually hit on, and it's kind of value promised. And then once you deliver it, how are they using it and tracking it very actively, and really watching what people do and kind of sitting over their shoulder and seeing kind of, are people really using it or not? That was kind of another lesson. And that's evergreen. I think every company should do that in some form or fashion. So it was a great time to learn and understand the market, and all of which helped us the next wave when EasyTap and WhatsApp and a lot of stuff started accelerating.
I'll come to EasyTap in a moment. That's the next, chapter in your, kind of bright and checkered career. But I want to, kind of spend a couple of moments, dive deeper into the first thing that you told us, which was basically, the timing is very, very important, right? You can't be too early. You can't be too late, right? You have to be early enough to get rich dividends, and then, kind of scale on top of that, right? And I know a lot of this is entrepreneurial instinct, which gets honed over time. But, given your vast experience, how do you, kind of, as an entrepreneur, right? How do you measure yourself against timing? Are there certain things that, kind of generally have worked for you, which you want to share with the larger audience today, where, hey, you know what, this is what good timing means. This is what getting early means. This is what getting too early means, or this is what getting in late means.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a lot of it. I mean, there is some instinct to it, and entrepreneurs are by definition going to be the early adopter. So, quite frankly, you're going to be thinking out of the box. You're going to be trying to solve a problem that clearly hasn't been solved. So there's a reason things haven't been solved, or people haven't thought a certain way if you have that entrepreneurial mindset. So you're going to be by definition early. I think the real point though is how do you objectively pressure test your assumptions, right? So we're all religious about our ideas, and we believe deeply that we know what's right. And my God, this industry needs to be disrupted, and nobody knows what they're doing. And I'm going to be, and that's probably true. But by being objective about, like, let me just understand how this is going to evolve. Let me hear from real customers. Let me really validate the pain point. And how do you validate pain point? Will help you understand the journey and be prepared. Like you might say, look, this is a technology that's bound to happen. I mean, we're living through many of them as we speak, which will clearly evolve and become extremely powerful over the next 5-10 years, whether it's SaaS or some new technologies like AI and other things. So these are good rivers to be in. So nobody's saying that you shouldn't be ready for a 10-year journey, but I think understanding where you are, what's your value proposition will help set expectations, understand funding, understand kind of where in the market there are small holes to fill and where in the market there are kind of entry points that seem small but are actually massive, and that it's worth the effort and time. A lot of times people are like, the business is not going anywhere. I'm going to, and they stay 5 or 6 years too long in an idea. And I think that's also because you're not continually pressure testing and having this kind of feedback loop in terms of what were my hypotheses, what is a matter of time, how do I validate this, and kind of build that into the engine of how the operation learns and get that feedback loop. It's extremely important. And I think that's what a good CEO should be doing, as much as being an evangelist and a product leader and a product visionary. You have to build in, I think, institutional learning as a discipline of, like, let's just make sure we're pressure testing everything. And how are we learning and how are we adapting? It's okay to be wrong on hypotheses, but then, okay, is this a make or break, or is this something we can work around and kind of continue forward on? So yeah, it's not just instinct. I think there is actually a method to it that you can kind of put in early in the company in terms of your learning journey and the culture of the company that will be very helpful as you kind of build a business, and especially when you go into new markets.
Awesome. And I think you did a lot of that and much more in your next stint, which was EasyTap, right? I remember, I was just taking my baby steps in my entrepreneurial career, and back and by then EasyTap had obviously, blown up. Every time I actually went, many times when I've actually gone to an Airtel store to, pay my bills. I've been bad at managing my bills. And every time I would go there, I would see that small EasyTap device, and that would be like the twinkle in my eye, right? That, oh, this is great, right?
Yeah.
So tell us some more about your EasyTap journey, right? After Intuit, you started EasyTap. What was the hypothesis? What was the pressure tests that you did? How did the product evolve? What were the metrics that you followed initially? And EasyTap, again, guys, was one of the first SaaS products built out of India, and also one of the first SaaS products to be sold into India, right?
Yeah.
Which again seems so counterintuitive, because we generally, most SaaS people feel that, selling into India may not be the best value proposition. But, you did that, and you did that super successfully. So also, a bunch of questions there, but another question was, what made you think that, you could sell a SaaS product in India, right? So yeah, a bunch of questions. How did EasyTap start? What was your thesis? How did it evolve?
Yeah, well, kind of following on the last discussion topic, actually didn't start as a SaaS product. It was a learning as we kind of evolved and understood the Indian market vis-a-vis the US. EasyTap was an interesting time. It was a bunch of friends of mine who had all worked with Nandan at UID, and so I think Bangalore is this amazing place, and I'm unbelievably bullish about the future, kind of having been in the Valley and know so many people in the Valley. I see kind of this flywheel of really smart people and building interesting things come together, and then, just magic happens and kind of people interconnect. And, I think all of the UID team and what iSpirit and India Stack teams have done is pretty amazing from an infrastructure point of view, but you're just getting this flywheel and ecosystem of people who are thinking about technology differently. And so we were incubated out of a group there. Again, this was still pretty early. This was 2010, we started talking about it. 2011, we started the company. So 12 years ago. um, and the idea was, and this thesis changed over time, but the thesis of the people who kind of, it's a group called Prime Ventures now, but it was Angel Prime back then. They're like, hey, what are some of the ideas that would make logical sense, that have done very well in the US, that would make logical sense here at the high level? And there was a company called Square in the US, which you could take a mobile phone and you could basically put a device and swipe credit cards, and all of a sudden you were scaling digital payments, given India's kind of mobile phone penetration and the fact that there was just huge room to grow in terms of digital payments, even back then, made logical sense. This was going to be the obvious way that you spread digital acceptance. And Square was very profitable because in some markets like the US and Europe and other places, there's a spread that's been around for a long time where companies take a good percentage of the transaction. That's how we started. And a very odd founding story. I had never met my co-founder Buxton before, but he was this genius from Intel who just had built this little device that really worked. And we had, again, a Nokia phone, and we were running demos, and we were just like, let's go build a Square of India. The journey was very different because we found out all of the stuff I told you about earlier. It was like, oh my God, distribution is different. The willingness to pay is different. Like you need every single thing I told you about. As we started getting in the market and saying, okay, is that model going to move over? If we were going to focus on the domestic market, it was like, nope. And all of a sudden the cost structure changed and everything. So, but it was a phenomenal journey because it really kind of reinforced what I told you about, NG Pay and Intuit. We went through and said, hey, something's wrong with this model. This US model is not going to work here. And then, by the way, there was a period of time where everybody was like the blank of India, the Y of India, the Z of India. And I think we realize now that India is such a different market that you have to build for India if you're going to kind of do really well and scale in India. Raise money. And very quickly, we thought, like, if you could take up for 1% of revenue in the US, here we were barely getting 0.1. I mean, that was a tough negotiation to kind of extract 0.1 because people didn't have cards. And while there was clearly going to be digital payment adoption, this distribution of cards had to come from banks. So there was just a lot of moving parts. And so what we said is like, look, this is one case where, and then there was this other thing that everyone kept telling us that, this is a cash market. It's not going to be digital. So don't even do it. That was the biggest no from VCs, was like, we just don't believe that it is, and we all heard that. And this was one that was easy to say. It was like, look, I don't care about the 95%. The question is, if 99% cash gets to 95% cash gets to 90% cash, that's a massive market. It's a massive market. And similar to the example I gave to you before, sometimes you got to know when you got to play into the base. And sometimes you got to know when you got to take a bet on something that's going to be an obvious trend. So if I go back in time to NG Pay and even the Intuit conversation, yeah, you could go after the feature phone market, but if you just made the bet on smartphones, you were kind of riding the right wave. And similarly, adoption of digital payments, I would say digitization of small business and organization of the small business ecosystem, AI, and kind of massive advancements in technology are all bets that I would make right now, even if the market's not quite there, but just figuring it out. So we realized something was wrong, and I just started. And I remember it was a whiteboard with one of our friends who was a partner at Prime, and we were like, something's wrong. And we just sat down at a whiteboard for an afternoon after a very bad VC meeting. So we had tons of bad VC meetings, and let's just rethink this model. And then what we realized was SaaS would make sense. And if you basically stop fighting over the money, and that was kind of left to the bank for us, and this is a model that works here, but maybe not in other markets. Let's turn into a software company, not just a kind of payments company that's trying to extract money from moving money from point A to point B. And I think we had actually kind of predicted UPI even then, even though we didn't know, kind of knew UPI was in the works, but we predicted this idea that payments shouldn't be kind of basically extortion of money just because you're moving. Especially if you're moving from bank account to bank account, why are you paying this kind of see. So we said, hey, what's the world look like where basically the margin for payments is going to go to zero? Let's start there, and let's do this thought exercise and work backwards of how do companies then basically have a sustainable value? And we said, listen, if the one is to basically go as people need just payments, but that required you to have distribution of small businesses because all of the large businesses had some option. If you're just trying to replicate a credit card machine. So you're either going to go and scale into small businesses, but then they'd have to be willing to pay and the customers would need cards. And this was probably 5 to 6 years. So this is one where the timing didn't make sense to us. Both the willingness to pay, the environmental demand, and then also kind of the amount of time it would take for this to kind of get to mass. So we said, let's focus on the place where our software capabilities would deliver 10x value to basically just being a payments company. And that's when EasyTap became a SaaS company. We focused not just on the hardware part, but we basically said, let's actually think about hardware for swiping cards, but also make sure that the software, the app, and then the integration capabilities become the differentiation. And can we actually solve business problems instead of just a payment transaction problem? And our first customers were a lot of these e-commerce companies that were having people, feet on the street, delivery boys, and handling tons of cash. So we said, what if we could move the cash to digital? Well, that would solve a huge problem for them. So the CEO was interested, not the CFO. So always to make sure that you're solving a CEO problem, not a CFO problem. Number one. Number two, differentiation meant not just digitizing, because that was kind of against commodity. Let's integrate to your app so that basically this kind of enterprise flow is delivering you kind of measurable benefits in terms of 5 or 6 different types of metrics. So that was how we evolved and how we became a SaaS company. And then we became much stickier. So while our market constrained, our value to the market and to certain customers became higher. And so we kind of carved out a place for us where we were very unique and an important part of the value chain, as opposed to just a supplier, if you will. So I'll pause there. I mean, I can talk a little bit about some of the metrics we learned. I think as we evolved, we really started tracking different metrics carefully from a SaaS point of view.
Oh, absolutely. We should actually segue into that because I think having what cannot be measured cannot be improved. And for you to measure the right stuff, you need to know how to have the right metrics in place. And I'm sure even in your EasyTap journey, the metrics would have evolved over a period of time. A, because the product evolved. B, because you guys also scaled, right? So why don't we start from the real beginning, right? On what metrics you guys tracked, and then, how that evolved. But before that, Bobby, one small thing, I mean, it will help if, and I think it's good if it comes directly from the horse's mouth. If you can tell everyone here, because there may be some people who may not be aware on what EasyTap exactly did, right? I know one part of it, but if you can just touch upon it, and then we can get into the metric side of things.
No, that's great. So EasyTap started off and ended up as a company where we allowed businesses to accept payments, physical payments in somebody's store, or if some, like I said, a delivery boy comes to home. How do they collect digital payments? Now, today, that could be flashing you a QR code in store or on a phone and taking a UPI payments. EasyTap does that. EasyTap also can take a credit card or a debit card swipe. We had a little machine that we built here in India. We were the first company to ever build a certified terminal from India. So we were actually one of the first manufacturing companies in India with homegrown IP. We were also one of the first to basically say payments has to be thought of as technical integration points. And we kind of had architecture as opposed to here's a terminal and here's a swipe card. So we had a little device. You could swipe the credit card. It would go to an app on a mobile phone and then process a payment, which would replace these very bulky credit card machines you see in stores. And as I said, it's a huge business in other countries. But then we evolved and said, hey, listen, India is evolving very quickly. When you're in a store, there are going to be other things like UPI, which is starting to take off. So let's make it so that in one solution, you can accept all types of payments, not just credit card, yes, but we were one of the first, I think, the first to generate QR codes for UPI on a phone. Wow. The other thing we did was we started integrating to systems. So, payments, I don't know if you've ever seen a store where somebody will swipe a credit card and then they'll go over to the POS terminal and then they'll enter in all of the details again. And that simple act is a huge inefficiency. So how could we take a payment and do multi-payments, but then also integrate into backend systems? So we were the first to really start thinking about, hey, can a payment system plug into a mobile app? So we built the world's first Android SDK for payments in the world. So then all of a sudden a delivery boy with an app on a mobile phone could take an easy tap device and then process payments, but not with our app, but with their app. And then all of this would be tightly integrated in. So we did that. And then the other thing is then we started saying, well, why don't we port the software across devices? Can it be mobile phones? So now Easy Tap can be on a credit card machine and it can generate QR codes and it'll all integrate to your backend systems, or it can be on the mobile phone with your plumber or your, any kind of vendor. And so that's what we did. So we were a solution for merchants of all sizes to take any kind of payment on any kind of device and integrate into any type of system. Because of the nature of the market, we did a lot of stuff that had never been done before anywhere in the world.
Oh, it's very, very inspiring, and that's why I thought the world should know, so many things that EasyTap achieved, because people might know about it in bits and pieces.
Mhm.
Like I myself, used to use the credit card solution, but as you rightly mentioned, there were so many, interesting aspects to that product.
Yeah.
Now, actually, jumping onto the metric side of things, as one of the first SaaS companies out of India, right? How did your metrics evolve, right? What are the metrics that you chased in the initial days, and then how did those metrics change, and why did they change?
Yeah. So it evolved very organically. First, we were just like, how many customers do we? It's like everybody. How many customers do you have? How many users do you have? And those were the metrics, right? And that was just and then it was kind of, what was your transaction volume like, right? So all of these will be very familiar to any kind of company, e-commerce company or enterprise company. Just how many sales do you have? How many users do you have? What's your transaction volume going through your system? If your transaction volume for a payments company is like GMV for a e-commerce
company.
That's right. And but you know what? That was actually quite superficial. And I think we realized that we were getting all these numbers, but it didn't kind of translate to kind of the revenue curve was not looking like our GMV curve. And I could get tons of users by having one deal with enterprise, get 1,000 users, but what was it? So there was just discord. There was not correlation between these. I think things really changed when we kind of said, look, we are a SaaS company, and we first of all need to start. And SaaS, unlike consumer, you should be in revenue. You should be cash flow positive in revenue. So we started tracking revenue very, very seriously at all levels. We've kind of made it that our engineering team was updated weekly, and all of our metrics were like, here's our business metrics, here's our updates in terms of what type of customers and what type of use cases we have, but here's our revenue. Wanted to make sure we instilled it in everybody that revenue mattered. But I think that a couple of as we got some more investors, and one of them in particular was very experienced in SaaS, came from the Valley, and they really taught us, I think, two important metrics that I would recommend for everybody to integrate. First of all, top of the funnel sales. There's a very simple equation where most people measure sales. It's basically kind of what's the kind of increase in kind of average monthly recurring revenue or annual recurring revenue over a quarterly sales cost. And there's a golden number of 4 to 5, usually, of what your kind of sales output looks like. So we were getting much more disciplined in terms of sales efficiency, because one thing you can do is just throw tons of sales and marketing dollars at stuff. And you can get an artificial growth of anything if you want it to be GMV or if you want it to be kind of users. So very quickly, we're like, it's not just about revenue or just about how many users we have, but what's the efficiency here? Because ultimately SaaS, once you actually go through that first phase of what's the value prop, and we just talked about it, how you should be then becoming more and more efficient. And so that's the top of the funnel, but that's not where you should stop. The other thing that they did, which was really important, was people get kind of like, hey, let's focus on the top of the funnel. But the other thing that most people don't do, and it's surprising because it's so intuitive, is what's your engagement post-sale? That's the bottom of the funnel. And so we were forced, and initially I was like, why are we tracking? But we were forced to say, okay, for your users, what's the organic expansion? So tell us what's net new, whether it's number of users or whatever your key metric is. If it was WhatsApp or something else, could be engagement, in terms of minutes spent. But what's your key metric that tracks engagement? Show us the net new, but what we really care about is the expansion of your existing base. And we want to see that ratio over contraction and churn. So net new can be, again, like I said, manufactured in a number of ways, through growing more sales, firepower or something. But your organic expansion over organic contraction and churn, that ratio is extremely important, again, in whatever metric. If that's growing on its own and your expansion is growing organically without you throwing more new sales on it, then you have basically a flywheel that's starting to move. And that really sunk in because it really forces you to question, have you delivered value? So I can generate tons of sales, but you don't have engagement and you really haven't solved the value part of the equation. So business is value promised and value delivered. And these guys used to say, look, at a certain point of a SaaS company's journey, if you just give us your data, we can tell you whether you're a good company or not. We don't need to beat the founder. And it's true, actually, if you feel like you've actually nailed value proposition and kind of product market fit. So those are the two. And it's the second one that I think people ignore. They just talk about sales numbers or GMV numbers. And then what you find out 2 to 3 years later, like they're raising hundreds of millions of dollars. Why? Because the flywheel's not moving and throwing off cash. And you shouldn't have to do that, especially if you're a SaaS company.
Got it. So what you're essentially telling us, Bobby, is that while initially it's okay to track the Uber numbers, like, the total transactional volume or GMV if you're an e-commerce company, but very soon, the meat of the matter lies in the fact that you should be tracking how much of revenue expansion has happened organically, right, within a company, and divide that by how much of churn is happening in that company. And if
or it could be users. By the way, we're in a world where users may even change. And I think as we get into worlds where like people aren't having users, it's more like just how much of a certain business are you owning, right? So we could actually potentially see users go and the traditional license model go down, but some other version that says that your software is managing more and more parts of the business, especially as AI kind of starts kicking in. You got to figure out what that metric is. Revenue is one component of it, but these are basically output metrics that say, hey, the business is getting value. And another way of restating what I just said is if you just turned off your sales engine for a year, would the business grow? Or would you basically start dying? And would it be throwing off cash? And if you can answer that correctly, then you have, the inverse of that is what's called a leaky bucket. You're basically churning out your business here. So you have to fill in the bucket at the top with more and more sales. And this is when you start seeing all of these problems with companies that basically are raising money to drive top line growth. And those are the numbers you see in the front page of newspapers, but you're actually not building sustainable businesses. So these are just good exercises. Again, if you turned off your sales engine, what's the business look like today? And if it's actually going to start contracting, then you have you have to go back to PMF. Really have PMF. Have you really figured out the right market?
Makes
start
sense.
questioning your hypotheses again.
And why we discussed this briefly when I met you recently. And the reason I love this, because one question that I've always struggled with, right, is how do you define PMF, right? And honestly, it's such a difficult question because at many levels, and having built products across my career for the past, kind of 15 years, I realized a lot of it initially for me was qualitative, right? I would see stuff and I would feel, hey, this is happening organically, or this user is referring to some other user, or that user came organically. Yeah, I am actually moving towards PMF. But after I spoke to you, I realized you can actually make that a mathematical problem.
Yeah, you can.
Right? And once you make that a mathematical problem, you can, maniacally start tracking it. And that way you can actually ensure that your product, your team, your entire proposition is moving in the right direction.
Yeah, it's a combo of, it's a great point. It's a combo actually of qualitative learning in the field, going back to what we said about A/B testing and just learning from the wild, I believe. And then tracking and just instilling this in. So look, ultimately what's a business? It's people will buy something, people will use something, and people will keep using it, right? I.e. not be replaced. These three
Yes.
things. And you'll learn that very quickly by selling, watching people use it, and then basically seeing if they replace you when somebody drops the price by like one, just a small
Yes.
fraction. If you can withstand these three questions, and then you can figure out how to measure these things, you're,
You're set.
80-20, you're in a pretty good place to be.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And now for, your next phase of your career, which is also your most recent one, right? With a product that I think in India is as ubiquitous as, I don't know anything else, which is as ubiquitous as WhatsApp.
Right.
So how was that stint? And I would like to learn more about, how when you joined, WhatsApp was also growing, right? And how do you think of WhatsApp as a platform? How do you think of how WhatsApp has evolved in the last few years, especially in India, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and it's very interesting, right? It was a US based company, and I
Yeah.
keep traveling to the US thanks to my current role. But even there, I don't see WhatsApp being used as frequently and as regularly as here. Here
Yeah.
it is bloodline, right? In fact, I remember my father is, obviously quite old, and I bought him a new phone, and he's like, "That's all fine. Will WhatsApp run on this phone?" That was his only question, right?
Yeah.
And the moment I said, "Yeah, it would," he was like, "Okay, then I'm ready to switch. Will all my chats be lost, or will that those be
Yeah.
ported in?" I said, "No, no, those will be ported in." I said, "Okay, then I'm ready to accept this gift of yours. Otherwise, I'm not going out of this old phone." So
Mm.
that's how ubiquitous and how all pervading WhatsApp has become in
Yeah.
India. But I'm sure that's the story for today. Maybe it was not as pervading when you joined, and it has evolved as a massive platform today where multiple businesses run on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
So your take on WhatsApp and specifically on WhatsApp as a platform?
Yeah. It was, listen, I think, no, I mean, by the time so when I came in, there was no India WhatsApp org. I was the first person hired to kind of build the org and build the strategy and think about different kind of evolutionary things, including the business. But yeah, no, look, it was still an amazing product, and it was one that all of us used, just like you said. It was large then. We've grown significantly since then. But I think that's just the product is phenomenal. And there were a couple takeaways. I think first and foremost, I started EasyTap, so that's like your own child. But whatever you do, it was easy for me to come to WhatsApp because it was just significant learning. It is something that really was at such massive scale that I felt like you could also move the needle for a country. And we literally would talk about like the problem statement with EasyTap was like, let's just build a business, which is extremely important and fulfilling journey. But here it was like, how do we help the country? Like, how can we live? This is one of the few places where we have the opportunity and obligation to talk in terms of helping tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people. And that was just a phenomenal challenge. It was difficult. If you go back in time, it was not considered an easy job to take. There's lots of and still it's a very complex job with lots of things that we had to really be careful about and think about, whether it's our users or how people use WhatsApp, and how do you also build a business around it without really kind of spoiling it. So it was a fascinating, phenomenal 4 years there. First thing I say is like, look, if you can't talk passionately about your product, you shouldn't be in it, right? And so whether it's I can talk passionately about payments and SaaS because, and I can talk, of course, passionately about WhatsApp because you can see it and feel it, but it's about articulating what the value prop is and really believing it. And if you don't believe it, you can't sell it. So that was the first thing about WhatsApp. I know I was just kind of honored in some sense to get the job because you're doing something that you believe, like you said, had huge opportunity and kind of huge kind of connect with people. The thing that I realized quickly was like, don't mess with something where you don't need to mess with it. So the product was so phenomenally well designed that where we very quickly we said, listen, let's figure out how to kind of make sure that we reinforce the core USP. So this is number 2, really understand what your value proposition was. And once you have clarity on that, and by the way, like I told you, the EasyTab journey, right? We couldn't just copy what was happening in the US. It took us a lot of learning quickly, actually the first couple of years, to really understand this is what we're going to bet on. And we think the timing is right. And then this is our USP, and we're going to kind of double down and triple down on it. And everything we did from tech and hiring just reinforced and tried to strengthen what we thought was our position in the ecosystem and right to win. And in WhatsApp's case, I think what they did phenomenally well was just a complete focus on reliability, simplicity, security, and privacy. And what happened was it just made it so, once you have set clarity, it makes it so easy to decide what decision to do and what not to do in anything. So when you say like, hey, let's go build the business, and it was clear that it would have to be going through the filter of, does this affect any of these three things? Or if it does, how are we going to make sure that we kind of maintain our standard, our kind of Six Sigma standard in all of these things, or more than Six Sigma in the case of something. So that was something they did phenomenally well. And I think that's why it was, not the first messaging platform, but the one that took off, because they did it in such a way. And, this is common knowledge. You can find this in many different people telling the story, but one of the first things they did is like, they didn't build, Jan and Brian, I'd come in just at the end of kind of the kind of founding group had left, but I got a chance to spend a lot of time with these guys, understand really the way they thought about the product. And just one example was they said that we don't want to mimic messaging, we want to mimic face-to-face communication. And so their UX was about, and the speed, like why is 5 milliseconds okay, or is it 1 millisecond or 10 milliseconds? Like what is, and the answer to that, it seems like an odd question, like what's the difference? And if you think about it from the wrong lens, like, hey, let's do messaging. SMS is your benchmark, right? So anything that's sub, a minute in those days is fine. But when it's like, my benchmark is if I'm facing you, how long does it take for words to leave my mouth to your ear? And then you organize, that design principle is very, very different. Wow. So you learn these things. So it's like, these are the things that matter, and what is our principle? And that's why literally speed matters, and why they architected it in a phenomenally way. So I learned a lot after having been in product management at that time, 15 years, 20 plus years, and keep learning. So that was great. But then we had a lot more to do. I think that was kind of the core product, but I think we realized that WhatsApp as a platform had a huge role to play. And this is the stuff that came out of India. So we built the organization around, how do we build an organization? How do we kind of focus on impact that we should focus on? So things like financial inclusion, things like education. How do we leverage WhatsApp to basically scale these things besides just kind of friends and family? And then secondly, how do we allow businesses to come on? And how do we turn this from a quote unquote messaging app to a platform on which things could scale, given the unique reach that we had and the comfort that people had? And in many cases, in most cases, where WhatsApp was the first on-ramp and probably the only digital on-ramp that most people who are underserved in this country would have to all of the amazing stuff that was happening, whether it was banking or education or health. So we focused on that, and we focused on kind of saying, let's make it easier and easier for organizations, businesses, small and large, to get on the platform, create experiences, so that we could basically make their services discoverable and available to every Indian. And that was what it meant to be a platform. And I think, we're really proud of what we did over the last 4 years there.
Very interesting. Two things that stand out. One is, UI, UX, and the fact that, you are measuring yourself against real life interaction. That's like a crazy benchmark to achieve, right? And the second one obviously is, as you rightly mentioned, empowering millions and millions and millions of, users through a really simple platform. And now, in my mind, it's like very clear, right? Like call it RSS, right?
Yeah.
Reliability, simplicity,
and
security.
Well, no, it's an interesting one. It was basically like, how do we build on the foundation? As opposed to just throwing a bunch of stuff on. And I think there's a lot of, people talked about, are you going to be a super app or not? And when I was there, for sure, it was like, no, not the way it was defined by most people, which was, let's get people on and just throw stuff. Everything we did was like, how do we maintain this experience so that it's in context, it's relevant. The user decides and can discover what they want, whether it's people or whether it's businesses or services. It was very powerful during COVID, where often we were the lifeline through which services were discoverable. So, so you were basically building on the foundation and reinforcing the foundation, and from that you were kind of building out, as opposed to just throwing a bunch of stuff on. And I think that's from a scalability point of view, from a value proposition point of view, a very important kind of lesson that I think founders should take to heart.
Makes sense. Now I wanted to, I know we are, kind of 2 minutes out, but I'll just spend a few more minutes, Bobby, because
Sure.
there are a lot of questions coming in also. Looking forward, right? Looking into the future. 2005, you come from the US to India, born and brought up in the US, you're in India. You've given it a 20-year horizon. I think those 20 years are going to get over in another couple of years.
They
right?
are. No, like
you're still in India, right? 2005 Bobby Bose versus 2025 Bobby Bose.
Yeah.
Is 2025 Bobby Bose still bullish about India? If yes, why? If not, then why not?
No, I mean, everything I thought we were going to do in 5 to 10 years took 20 years, but I'm not just as bullish, I'm more bullish because that inflection and that acceleration is happening. I'm bullish on multiple fronts. First of all, I mentioned the ecosystem. Let's start there. I think there's so much that I see in the Valley, just having kind of spent a lot of time there, and we raise money from there and a lot of friends there, that I'm seeing in India and certainly Bangalore for sure. And just it starts with amazing entrepreneurs. So, as I mentioned, in NG Pay days, you could fit all of us in a small
ballroom,
right? And now, and now you're actually, people are on their third startup company. You're on your second company. People have worked together. People have learned and extracted lessons. We've actually evolved our thinking and matured our thinking of like, hey, listen, like I told you, it used to be, let's take this idea from the US and just scale it in India. And now it's like, we have to build from India out. And then that was EasyTap and WhatsApp. Now it's like, why would we stop in India? The companies everybody should be afraid of should be the Indian companies, because quite frankly, software is software. And if you can solve the Indian challenges here and build massive scale, phenomenal cost structure with all of the different friction points, between distribution and cost and willingness to pay and the evolution of market, think of what it's like when you take that to other markets where they're used to very fat margins and not as much pressure. So we went from copy US, copy Europe, build for India with India in mind, to build in India, and let's kind of, I would say 20 to 25% of the market share 5 years from now, that's in world tech stock exchanges should be sitting with Indian companies, not US companies. That would be make me very, very happy. That's going to come from entrepreneurs. It's going to come from kind of advances in technology that make it even easier for Indian companies to get to market, not just in our domestic market, but then go abroad very quickly. Some of the friction we had in NG Pay in terms of scalability and testing and infrastructure no longer exists. And then third, I think the India stack, people just know it as a thing, but again, I think we've kind of lived and breathed it here in Bangalore, especially in tech. But the way people think about building software and services, and we talk about platforms very trivially, but I think a lot of the WhatsApp platform thinking came from India. Why? Because what India Stack does is basically kind of restructure the entire way that software works. Software used to be monolithic, right? And a bunch of black boxes, regardless of the industry. What India Stack did, and we should credit Nandan and the team for this, is no, why are all of these monolithic? Let's actually start creating kind of building blocks available to all. And now you're almost starting to kind of re-architect the entire way the world works digitally. That's happening here, and it's India that's leading the way, and it's going to be adopted in other countries. It's revolutionary, and I think what it means is, besides entrepreneurial talent, besides difficult markets that kind of create tougher companies and tougher entrepreneurs and tougher people, we're going to have kind of a huge head start in terms of the architecture of how you think about businesses and creating disruptive models that are going to come after and take market share away from other companies because we're going to be quicker and nimbler, thinking in a very different mindset. And I can tell you for a fact, many of the people that I are doing very well in the Valley do not think like the Indian tech entrepreneurs do. And that's because of what we've lived through and kind of seen evolve over the last 5 years or so.
Well, that's so inspiring, while it is good to be, superficially bullish about India, the way you put it, really, kind of justifies why you should be bullish. The fact that the ecosystem has matured over the years, the fact that, now you have some amazing tech talent that has come, right? Earlier, we used to, not get great tech developers, etc. Now, our developers from our country are as good as anywhere in the world or even better. Earlier,
Yeah.
you probably did not get great product guys in India, but now I think India is producing product geeks as well as anywhere else in the world, right? And now
Absolutely.
the same goes for our whole our entire GTM efforts also. And then the whole, if you overlay this with the entire India stack story, then I think it's a massively potent combination that
Yeah.
is waiting to explode.
Well, and I know you're seeing this, right? You're seeing US companies basically saying, why do we have thousands of engineers to build software, right?
Yes.
We in India already know that.
Right.
And then India Stack made it like, why do I don't even need people to do KYC.
Yes.
Why am I
Yes,
even
sir.
paying for that?
Yeah,
Those are
for that.
components. And then
Yes.
as things go from hard coded to no code and now no code to AI generation, we're so well in terms of mindset ready for these kind of massive trends. And I think people are already being caught off guard. And people are like, why are you here? So we're already there and you're seeing it play out in front of your eyes. So I think we're well set. And, I said it then. We were probably, my wife and I, probably 20 years too early or 15 years too early. Who knows? But now, if your parents emigrated from India to go somewhere else because they thought that was the place to be, this generation should be coming back to India. And that's what we thought when we came back here. Now I think it's, again, from a 10, 15-year point of view, this is a phenomenal place to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree. In fact, I do have so many of my friends. I had told you at the beginning of this discussion that 2007, a bunch of my friends, all of them were actually, writing their exams, either the GRE or
Yeah.
GMAT to, kind of move out of India. Many of them
Yep.
have actually come back to India. And some of us who stayed back, they look at us with envy. That's what, India has given us in the last 20 years.
Totally.
Absolutely. Last segment, I know we are 10 minutes in. If you have a couple of minutes, I know there's a,
Sure.
there's a rapid fire segment that we do with all of our guests, right? So fundamentally what it means, Bobby, is you don't get time to think, right? These are simpler questions, but very, very pointed. So, and something like a multi-choice. If you're okay with it, we can go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your favorite productivity tool or app?
This one will surprise you because I use it every day. It's actually not an app. It's a piece of yellow legal notepad and a pencil or a pen. And every morning, what's my to-do list? Next day, cross off, not start it over again. I think actually it's the most effective thing. I think sometimes we've lost the art of writing and kind of how the brain interacts with that. So that's my number one productivity app.
Awesome. iOS or Android?
Android.
One book you think every entrepreneur should read?
I'll give you two. Well, actually, give you three. Book from a business point of view, I've always thought everyone should read the Amazon annual letter. I think there's a book they called Invent and Wander that Jeff Bezos is an aggregation of these. I would recommend that in terms of just business at scale. I mean, just fun and foundational principles. And there's a bunch of them that we talked about today. I think he has embodied a lot. And how do you instill that into organizations? SAAS, actually, I think one of my good friends, Manav Garg, wrote a book. He's a founder of Eka Software and has started one of the first India-focused SaaS funds called Together. So if you want to kind of learn more about SaaS and some of the stuff we talked about, I think this book, India SaaS Story, is a good one. And I'll give you one more. The two online things that I read religiously, listen to religiously, are the Stratechery, Ben Thompson's newsletter. If you want to get mega trends, that would be one. And the podcast I listen to. So I kind of expanded. The All In podcast. It's Chamath, my former investor, David Sachs, one of the best SaaS in terms of SaaS. He's one of the best in the world, and a couple others. So those would be the 4 things I'd recommend
Awesome.
to people.
If today you had to actually restart, right, and build a new product, would you actually sell it in India or sell it in the US?
That's a great question. Depends what. I think what I said earlier is what I would do, which is, first of all, I think enterprise and SaaS and certain sectors that where India can kind of give you a head start over things that can be transferable, I find appealing because you get a lot of bang for buck. So enterprise SaaS, fintech, which we've just been through. I think there's going to be a lot of platforms where we're going to start automating and leveraging the stuff I talked about. So I think a lot of the foundational platforms of how you build up software, I think we're there. So these are transferable ones. I would kind of build in India, but I would also, and this is probably one of the things I would have done in other avatars. I would look for stuff where you can kind of take the India advantage and take it abroad, because I think our companies and products are going to be very tough to deal with abroad. So why would you give up all of that market share? The best software companies, especially SaaS companies, should be cross-border.
I think that's one of the most inspiring statements you made. I think everyone here in India has reached that stage where we can build products for the world, right? And that's what we all aspire to do. That's how we started this podcast also. So it's like, the whole thing is coming a full circle at the end of this podcast. It's been amazing talking to you, Bobby.
My pleasure.
And we are 15 minutes out, and yet, we've been going on and on. So that's how, kind of interesting, absorbing, and insightful this discussion has been. But I'm also, kind of conscious of your time, so I'll have to call it quits now. Brilliant discussion, Bobby. Thank you very much again for taking time.
Thank you, Srini, and not just for this. I think you're a great example of why we're all bullish. Multi-time entrepreneur, somebody who's also kind of paying it forward. I think this is what it looks like. So I always enjoy this conversation.